Hello, witches, and welcome back to another episode of Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your illuminating host, Megan Angus. We have a cold open to our podcast episode this week because Spotify decided to make a bunch of changes without announcing those changes to any of their content creators, and my intros and my outros and my ads are all gone. Remember, kids, corporations don't give a fuck about you. We'll do something soon in the future. We might be changing platforms. Who knows how that's going to go? But whatever. We are here now, and a little corporate shenanigan BS is not going to stop the witchcraft. Hardly. So let's get into the preamble, and then let's get into the good stuff. Of course, we are sending peace and power to all oppressed peoples around the planet, keeping those folks in our hearts and keeping those folks in our minds as we are speaking truth to power. Of course, of course. We are continuing to move through winter and its stillness, its season of rest and dreaming and all of that good stuff. As I say in every episode, thanks for being here with me. Thanks for doing this work for yourself and for community. If this podcast is something that does something for you, please leave a rating on whatever platform you listen to this on. If you can leave a comment, that's always much appreciated. Please share this on social media, share this with your friends and family and coworkers. If it really does something for you, you can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month is just your way of putting a tip in my tip jar and saying thanks so much for doing this work and supporting the work while it's getting done. For folks that join at the $5 level and higher, you will get the notes from these podcast episodes. And for folks that join at the $9 level and higher, you will get the workbooks and the slides and all of that stuff to the Big Wheel of the Year classes and lots of other stuff. And folks that join at the $23 a month level and higher can get private readings with me. So go and check out my Patreon. There's a link in the description of this episode. And, come get into some trouble with us. Witchery! It is afoot. Don't make that mistake. One of the things that patrons have access to is our monthly get-together. Used to be Tarot Circle. 2024, we have switched it up to Hecate's Supper Club, where we get together every month and we talk about witchcraft and magic and spellcrafting and ritual and all of that good stuff. Last month, we went over the 8 phases of the lunar cycle, just to make sure that we had our foundations covered. This month, we are going to continue to do our foundational lunar work, and we are going to be looking at specialty moons, like eclipses, black moons, blue moons, blood moons, etc., etc., and what they are, how to determine them, and what kind of spellcrafting, ritual, and witchcraft is best suited for when we are experiencing those moons. All that and more on my Patreon. Come and check it out. What else? Oh, my books have reopened to the public. So, if you didn't know, I do astrology readings and I do tarot readings. So you can sign up through my website. That's another thing that's a benefit to patrons. You get a discount code if you are one of my patrons for those readings. And my books for February are already about half filled. So if you've been wanting to get a reading, sign up now before the books are filled up. Oh, and last but not least, this is why I have notes for my episodes. Last but not least, I mentioned this last month. I will be running my multi-week Tarot Fundamentals workshop in the next couple of months. If you want more information about that, you can sign up to my newsletter, and at some point I will send out more information about that. You can check my website. There will be early signups and discount codes for my patrons because My patrons make it possible for me to do this work, so I really try to spoil you guys as much as I possibly can. Thank you so much to my patrons who support me, and thank you so much to the folks who trust me to guide them through this work. My tarot workshop is a delight. I love teaching it. The feedback that I get from it is really exceptional, and it's a good time. We have a good time in there. Okay. Let's ground into this week's energy. This is Imbolc season 2024, February new moon in Aquarius, lunar week 44 by some lunar calendars. If you are new here, you will hear me use that phrase a lot in this podcast. And it's because lunar calendars are a thing that go back thousands of years, and plenty of civilizations today still use them. Hindus follow a lunar calendar, Jewish folks, Muslim folks, pretty much all of Asia follows a lunar calendar. A lot of folks still follow the lunar calendar. The Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church still follows a lunar calendar. And yet they are all slightly off from each other or very different from each other, depending on when those different cultures have their New Year's. This last year, I decided to start our lunar calendar count on spring equinox of 2023. So by our lunar count, we're in week 44. And I think I'm going to keep that going until our next spring equinox. And one of our big holidays that we have this week is the Asian Lunar New Year, which is the year of the dragon. And this will start the lunar week count for those folks this week. So I know, numbers, time, whatever. Who believes in any of that stuff anyways, right? So we will get into what we're doing with our Asian Lunar New Year celebrations here in just a second, but let's ground into where we are on the wheel. We are currently still in the season of winter. And this is a season of darkness, of stillness, of resetting, and dreaming of what it is that we are going to get up to when the new solar cycle starts at spring equinox, or shifts into its next phase is another way of saying that. And as we pass through the middle of winter, we step into Imbolc season, also pronounced Emolga in some traditions. And this is when we have left Capricorn and we move into Aquarius and ultimately Pisces, which will then take us to spring equinox. So what are we doing during Imbolc season? Our focus shifts from the Yule energy that we are working with, which is really about like death and rebirth and stillness and darkness. And we are starting to shift into the next portion of that stuff of resetting ourselves, cleansing ourselves of like old beliefs and old systems, and opening up to the information from the universe, from the past, from alternate futures, around what could be possible in this next year of activity and witch work. So purification, perseverance, renewal, and dreams are big themes that we are working with at this time of year. And to break that down a little bit more, and we talk about this in the Imbolc class, and these are listed off in the workbooks and stuff, but it's things like birth and initiation, the feeling of waking up after a deep sleep. That vibe is very much at the core of Imbolc season for me. We are not unconscious. We are coming back to consciousness, but maybe we barely have one eye open, right? We might still be drifting a little bit kind of on the borderlands of the dream worlds. And it might be a little nebulous and hazy and foggy in that place, right? It might be a little difficult to tell what's real and what is fantasy. We're slow moving. Our bodies are just coming back to life. or rolling forward toward the new life. And so we're moving slow, we're being gentle with our systems, but there is this sort of stirring under the snow, right? There's movement. The frozen waters of our life are beginning to melt and shift and change shape and move once again. And so in that work, we are passing through the last stages of our death work that we might be doing for winter. And we might be stepping into doing different types of purification work, a renewal for the home, a renewal of the body in some way. And deeply important in Imbolc season is this idea of stirring our vitality and waking our systems back up again. And so in that, we are perhaps rededicating ourselves to learning a new skill or our spiritual practices or our belief systems. A lot of witches do initiation practices during Imbolc, or a reconfirmation of their spiritual practices during Imbolc. And we are also honoring the craftspeople and the wisdom keepers in our communities who have been kind of holding it down while we have been drifting in the void and doing that work in the dark that is so necessary and important. The potent, rich, black dark. All of that good stuff. One of our chief goddesses and archetypes that we work with in Imbolc season is the goddess Bridget, who is a goddess of fire and lustiness and craftsmanship and vitality and strength. And so I often have an image in my mind of snow and a fire at the same time, and the process of that cold and heat sitting with each other, and the experience of those two extremes. And that sort of like being drawn back up out of the darkness towards the growing light. Light without heat, but light all the same. While we are moving through the first half of Imbolc season, our focus moves away from the external material world that we are really focused on during Capricorn to an inner experience where we drift in a gray, liminal space as winter winds on, floating in alternate pasts, alternate presents, alternate futures, and connecting temporarily to archetypal concepts much, much larger than us. This is all very potent work at this time of year. The mind is out in front, and it's a great time to connect with the universe for a cosmic download, or several of them. So also, as we pass through this portion of the wheel, starting January 20th and running through February 17th, we are in the tree month of Rowan. The Rowan moon, which is this new moon, is associated with Brigid, the Celtic goddess of hearth and home. Of course, she is honored on February 1st at Imbolc. She is a fire goddess, as I mentioned before, and she also offers protection to mothers and families, as well as watching over the hearth fires. As I said, this is a great time for performing initiations, either with a group that you work with or self-initiations. Both are perfectly appropriate, in my opinion. The tree month of Rowan is known to the Celts as Lush, and the Rowan tree is associated with astral travel, personal power, and success. And these are things that all kind of make sense for what it is that we're focusing on at this time. A charm carved into a bit of rowan twig will protect the wearer from harm. And Norsemen were known to have used rowan branches as rune staves for protection. In some countries, rowan is planted in graveyards to prevent the dead from lingering around too long. And those traditions all thread into a lot of our holy days that we are working through at this time of year. Okay. So specifically in this week, we are hanging out with a new moon in Aquarius. And the new moon in Aquarius is centered in the idea of initiating and seeding a new intellectually based, focused work of future, friend groups, and revolutionary, communal, progressive, group-oriented work. New moons for us are a seed or a start. They are a point of initiation. All of our new moons are like a gate that we get to walk through to start a new journey or a new iteration of a journey or a process that maybe we've been working on for some time. It's an opportunity to come back to something that we haven't worked on in a while. And this is our first Aquarius new moon with Pluto in Aquarius for the last 250-ish years. And so that's potent, right? Last new moon was our last Capricorn new moon with Pluto in Capricorn. This is our first Aquarius new moon with Pluto in Aquarius. So this is a moon that draws focus to all of the Plutonian stuff and the Aquarian stuff. And last new moon, I described that new moon as a moon that connects the past and the present and the future. And it does it in the sense of bringing focus to traditions and heritages and legacies. This is also a new moon that connects the past and the present and the future in very abstract and existential ways. Philosophies and ancient wisdom sources that are timeless and kind of move with us through time. But bringing it back to Pluto, and Aquarius in particular, Pluto reveals the corruption in the systems and the environments that it moves through. That's not all that it does, but that's a lot of what it does. When we think about relationally, Pluto, when it moved into Capricorn in 2008, that's when the housing crisis started in America. But it didn't start in 2008, right? It was revealed in 2008. The systemic issues that caused the housing crisis were something that had been, building for years and years before that. And so, that's kind of where we are now with Pluto stepping into Aquarius. Things are going to be revealed that have been slowly building up over time. And now the rot and the corruption is like too much to ignore. Aquarius relates to unorthodox thinking and lifestyles, communal systems, and supposedly progressive and liberal movements. Consider all of the supposedly progressive or liberal groups or celebrities who have been supporting genocide over the last few months and who still side with it or maybe have always sided with it, right? And that stuff is coming to the surface now, but it's something that's been happening for quite some time. That's a great example of Pluto's transits through a sign. It reveals what is corrupt. But Pluto also represents the healing that could take place after that revelation. Pluto, a thing I will often say to myself in my mind about Pluto is the poison and the medicine at the same time. And it's up to us to figure out how that works. So, no pressure. This moon is also square to Uranus and Taurus, who is, of course, the ruler of Aquarius. And it's trine the South Node. All of this talk of questioning progressive movements or progressive icons that we might feel aligned with might be really feeling like edgelord bullshit, right? Like, why am I doing this? Is it just for PC optics? Like, what's the point to this? Squares from Uranus can manifest as shocking, unexpected, and destabilizing events or information that suddenly pops up out of nowhere, but not really, right? But it can also play out in seeing radical stuff in our world and rejecting it out of hand because it's too weird or it's too inconvenient. It calls for work that we're just like not wanting to get involved with or do. And the South Node, as we know, is involved in this. The South Node can encourage us to hold on to regressive beliefs and behaviors. Again, because we don't want to challenge ourselves to break out of our old ways. So, a place where we can start to approach this work, if it feels difficult, if it feels confusing, start here. Ask yourself, am I living in a way that expresses my most unique and original self? Ask yourself, am I seeking freedom from old systems? Any kind of system. Belief systems, financial systems, communal systems, family traditions, all of that. Am I seeking freedom and liberation from those things? Are my social groups or partnerships supporting that liberation work and personal revolution? If the answer is no to these questions, utilize this new moon to plant a seed or a promise to yourself and our collective future dedicated to making progress in these places. In other words, in what ways can you live a more authentic life? In what ways can you question these traditions that have been handed to you? In what ways can you effectively rock the boat, practically, rock the boat, and lovingly encourage that change and that shift and that growth in yourself and in your community. This new moon is an invitation to begin a new journey or innovate an original personal connection to the idea of the future. What is it to be revolutionary? What is it to be focused on humanity? What is it to be altruistic? So those are all journaling ideas that you can work with this new moon. And my last one that I will give you is this. Take some private time to critically examine and call out traditional, quote unquote, traditional beliefs, traditional patterns, traditional attitudes that may have been handed to you, but may not actually serve you or serve the future that you want for yourself and your community and humanity at large. Okay. Moving into the rest of the stuff that's happening this week. We have a lot happening this week. This new moon is a big deal. It's a big deal every year because so many different systems hinge on this new moon that falls in Aquarius, aka the second new moon after the winter solstice. A lot of different timing systems, holiday systems, cultural systems hinge on this new moon happening. If we look at it, we've got Lunar New Year. We have the kickoff of Vasant Pashami, which is a Hindu festival dedicated to Saraswati, the goddess of creativity and skills and talents, very similar to Bridget's jam. We have running throughout February, Pawamu from our Hopi friends and ancestors, the Midwinter Dream Festival from our Iroquois friends and ancestors, and the Midwinter Festival from our Oneida friends and ancestors. And all of these have a special focus on star goddesses who are coming through and waking up the land and blessing seeds and cleansing the equipment that will be used for the next growing season. We also have, as I mentioned, Lunar New Year, kind of a big deal. We'll get into some more details about that in just a second. And we also have in this season Carnival, which kicks off with Shrove Monday, and then Shrove Tuesday, aka Mardi Gras, and then Ash Wednesday, which opens up the Lenten season, which is the Catholic Church's annual global bacchanal and purification ritual. So here again, there's this idea of waking up life, purifying the systems, getting stuff going. Billions of practitioners are encouraged to indulge in the sweet life, and then purify through abstinence and mortification. And this season will ultimately deliver you to Easter, aka Ostara season and spring equinox. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But yeah, that's where we're at, right? So let's talk a little bit about what is happening with Lunar New Year. The Lunar New Year, especially particularly in China, is one of the most prominent and celebrated festivals. This marks the beginning of their 15-day long spring festival. I know in a lot of places around the world it's still very cold, very icy, very snowy, and even so, in a lot of places in China, even though it's still very cold and wintry outside, there's this sort of insistence on the spring energy is here or it's on its way, and let's clear stuff out and make room for its arrival. But some of the traditional ways that this is observed are with reunion dinners where friends and family that have kind of scattered around the planet or around, the region or whatever, come back together and share meals together, which is often considered the most important get-together meal of the year. And this dinner will usually include chicken, pork, and dumplings. So yes, going to get dumplings is a holy act this week. That is absolutely a magical thing. Other traditions include thoroughly cleaning one's house to sweep away any bad luck, but we have a little asterisk around that. There's some special elements of that tradition. Decorating doors and windows with red paper cuts or red details, red decorations. Red means good luck. Lighting firecrackers, attending fireworks displays. A very traditional New Year's gift is giving money in a red envelope, and folks will go to the bank and get stacks of ones or more, if they're balling like that, that are brand new, like unused money, and they'll take a dollar bill and they fold it up in a red envelope and they give it to all of their neighbors or all of their coworkers or whatever, and it's basically an invitation for prosperity and abundance in that new year. It's good luck to give them, and it's good luck to receive them. And the color red is not just good luck, but it's also thought to ward off evil or, bad times, basically. In Vietnam, Lunar New Year is called Tet, and many customs practiced during Tet are very similar: family reunions, ancestral worship, cooking special meals, all of that good stuff. Apricot blossoms, peach blossoms, plum blossoms, chrysanthemums, pansies, marigolds, these are all very special flowers to work with at this time of year, and you could certainly, any of those that are safe to eat or drink a tea of, it would be very appropriate to do that. Losar is the Tibetan Buddhist festival connected to this. The Korean New Year is called Seolal. And again, dressing in new clothes, sprucing up the house, all of that good stuff, very, very appropriate. Now, this year, Lunar New Year is in the sign of the dragon. Every year, the Lunar New Year is overseen by one of 12 animals, and this year we are stepping into the year of the dragon. And the dragon has significant symbolism, is definitely a revered symbol, very potent, very powerful. It represents positive qualities like power, strength, good luck, wisdom, and there's an interesting alignment in all of that for me when we think about all of the stuff that Pluto touches on. The Chinese dragon is considered a celestial and divine creature with the ability to control natural elements like wind and water. It's, a year that a lot of folks will think of as being very auspicious, that opportunities can be very abundant. There can be exciting advancements for people kind of in all sorts of realms. And, I'm down with all of that symbolism. I just want to remind you all that just because an opportunity arrives doesn't mean that the abundance behind the opportunity is necessarily going to manifest unless we put in the hard work. And so here again, we can see why it's so important to question things that are inhibiting us from being our most authentic self. And we want to question systems that might be inhibiting us from evoking or calling in the most amazing futures that we can. To give you a sense of the kind of energy that folks connect to the Year of the Dragon, Bruce Lee was born in the Year of the Dragon. Martin Luther King was born in the Year of the Dragon, and so was Vladimir Putin, right? So a pretty intense collection of people, but people who at all the same, excuse me, thank you, computer, rude, all the same, you know, very powerful people, very important stuff here. Okay, so if you're wanting to honor some of the traditions with Lunar New Year, wear red and do not wear white. White in a lot of Asian cultures is connected to death right? Like as us witches, us pagans, you know, we are working in that death energy still because it's wintertime for us. But if you are wanting to work with that Imbolc symbolism of shifting out of death and stillness and into waking up your vitality, wear red. Bring it on. Passing out those red envelopes, as I talked about, big time lucky tradition, and a very special tradition. One of the interesting ones that I thought that I wrote down here was avoid cutting or washing your hair. So cutting your hair or washing your hair in the week leading up to New Year is fine, but you don't want to do it on the day of. Same for scissors and knives. If you can avoid it, do not use scissors or knives on the day of the New Year. Not great, because you're cutting the luck. You're severing the energy there. Now, lots of people will say cleaning your house is an auspicious tradition to observe during this time of year, and I agree. However, on the day of Chinese New Year, you should not sweep, because you are not sweeping out the bad luck, you're sweeping out the good luck. This is the day that you're inviting in all of that stuff. And so on that same tip, on that same idea, opening up your windows and doors and allowing the good luck to flow in on New Year's Day. Very, very important. Also, you might get a little cold, but hey, you'll freshen the house, you know, air out the house a little bit. It's wintertime. You probably haven't opened your windows in a little while. So, you know, get the energy flowing is literally what we're doing at this time. And as I mentioned before, eating traditional foods, very auspicious. Dumplings are thought of as being a symbol of prosperity. Noodles for longevity. Fish is also something that's thought of as ensuring prosperity. So all of these are great. And or whatever you can afford. One of the other things that I will say about Imbolc season as a witch is that I find it's very useful to use up whatever is in the pantry, whatever's in the back of the fridge, whatever's been hanging out in the freezer for a couple of months. Use up those old energy systems. But food, again, right? It's kind of this idea of food being a big deal at this time of year. Same with the Lenten tradition of like, we're eating very specific and special things during the Shrove Monday and Mardi Gras and Ash Wednesday stuff. And then once Lent hits, we are abstaining from certain foods. So there's something about what are you feeding yourself? And that's a really cool metaphor to work with in all of this. What are we feeding ourselves with? And where did that come from? And to what end? What are we going to do with that fuel going forward? Okay, so what else is happening this week? As I mentioned, Shrove Monday, Mardi Gras, Ash Wednesday. This is all part of the Lenten tradition. And those are, just so you have some dates, because I've just been going off here. February 9th/10th is the Asian Lunar New Year, again, for Dragon. February 12th, Shrove Monday. February 13th, Mardi Gras. February 14th, Ash Wednesday. Also on February 14th, we have a festival from our Armenian friends and ancestors called Turndes. And Turndes is a pre-Christian pagan festival. It was quote-unquote merged, which is the diplomatic way of saying subsumed, right, appropriated by Catholics many, many hundreds of years ago, as a part of the presentation of Jesus at the temple. Remember, Jesus was born on December 21st. I mean, December 25th. Or spring equinox, depending on which source you're working with. But Candlemas and Turndes fall, somewhere in this portion of the year. Candlemas is another name for Imbolc, of course. And if we're using the Eastern Orthodox lunar calendar, it's falling a little bit deeper this year into February. In the ancient pre-Christian form of this holiday, this was a massive feast. Again, right? Food being a big deal here. What are we eating? What are we feeding ourselves? In the metaphor of, let's not get into any kind of weird stuff with that diet culture. Please step aside. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, what are the sources of inspiration, right? What are the sources of fuel that I am working with at this time of year? But in Armenia, this was connected with fire, sun worship, and it symbolized the arrival of spring and fertility. And there is a very fun and fancy fertility holiday that also sits very nicely in the midst of all of this stuff called Lupercalia. I have a huge piece on my website about Lupercalia. Technically speaking, it's next week. I really wanted to talk about it this week, but technically it's next week, so I'm going to save the meat of what I have to say about that holiday for next week. But just know, my kinky freaks, our time has come, okay? It's our yearly festival. Freaks, please report to the dance floor. It is time. But on this day, bonfires were lit and couples would jump over the fire to make their love stronger, and childless people would do it in hopes of getting pregnant or, starting a family or whatever, which is also very much connected to Lupercalia and some of the other festivals at this time. And then ashes from these fires were scattered across the fields to guarantee good harvest. And we see that kind of a tradition over and over and over again of doing something at one portion of the year to fuel, again, there's that thing, right? Stuff that's going to be happening in the future. And so, ashes, Ash Wednesday, etc., right? It's all tied together. And again, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Are there other holy days happening this week? Yes. Are we going to talk about them? No, we're not. That's the stuff that I want you guys to focus on. If you want to do research on those, I highly recommend it. So now I'm going to take a little sippy. We're all staying hydrated, right? Take a little sippy with me. Okay. And now let's look at the astrology of this lunar week, running from approximately February 9th to February 15th. We're not going to talk about every transit. We're going to talk about the big ones. Here are what I think are going to be the big ones. Side note to the side note. If you're wanting a more comprehensive rundown of this week's astrology, go check out Ghost of a Podcast by Jessica Lanyadoo. She is absolutely amazing. And she does a weekly astro podcast, and it's always more thorough than what I do. But this is my take on the astrology, given our wheel symbolism, our witch symbolism, our pagan holidays, our global holidays that are happening, etc., etc. On February 10th, so basically kind of on/just after the new moon, we will see Mercury in Aquarius squaring Jupiter in Taurus at 8 degrees. And generally speaking, this is a pretty chill and helpful transit. It really can help with calling in optimism. And it also can really help in finding any faults that we have in our grand design. Now, stepping back and thinking about the work that we're doing in this week with a new moon in Aquarius, right? We're calling in visions of the future, and we're trying to be as altruistic and progressive and radical with those visions as possible. And so this Mercury Jupiter square, I think, is actually really helpful with that work, again, of calling focus to the grand design and hopefully getting some clues on maybe some things that we've overlooked, maybe some parts that we've been avoiding of like, oh, I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm sure we'll figure it out eventually. No. Let's try to figure it out now. Let's not avoid the hard parts. We have help. Let's deal with the hard parts. If there is something difficult about Mercury square Jupiter, it's that we can get real bombastic. We can get real, hot-headed, and not hot-headed. That's not exactly what I want to say. We can get real egotistical and be very convinced that like my way of thinking is right. My ideas are correct. My vision of the future is the only vision. And, you know, when Jupiter is acting up, it can be very dogmatic. It can be very fanatical. When Mercury is acting up, it can be very chatty. It's like addicted to scrolling and, you know, and it's just like acquiring data for the sake of acquiring data. So, you know, that could be ego stuff. That could be arguments for just like the sake of wasting oxygen. But mostly I think that this is a very helpful square. That's like, here's where the problems are. Let's work on them. Let's get it going. February 12th, Mars enters Aquarius. And so now we will have the Sun, Moon, Mars, and Pluto all hanging out in Aquarius. And the very next day, February 13th, this is what I think is probably the hot spot in our astrology for this week. Mars will conjunct Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius. Now, can this ever be helpful or good? Sure, probably. Right? We're building an optimistic future. So where can this be helpful? In feeling your power, in understanding the power that you have, your proximity to power, how you relate to power and power systems and all of that stuff. But it's very important that we get real with ourselves about the internal dialogue that we are having there. Mars square Jupiter in the background, right? Don't forget. Because most of us are humans, I'm going to guess, who are listening to this. And when we get a little taste of power, it's very normal for us to act up and do dumb stuff. We want revenge. We want to gloat. We want to show off, right? We're looking at very short-sighted aims a lot of the time when we're moving in that space. And Mars is, God bless that planet, extremely short-sighted, is very concerned with the next 5 minutes. And, you know, whatever I did, I'll deal with that later kind of a thing, you know. And so when Mars and Pluto get together, there can be a lot of aggression. There can be a lot of ego. There can be manipulation. Just like funky attitudes, funky stuff. People that are excited to fight about it. People that are excited to flex whatever little scrap of power they might have gotten a hold of and, you know, intimidate and frighten people into doing what they want them to do. So just be aware that there's going to be a little bit of that in community, maybe a lot of that in community, maybe in the day-to-day interactions that you have throughout this week, seeing people just acting up. On the global stage, I don't know, is there anything going on in the world that might reflect that kind of stuff? Again, as we say every week, we don't need the astrology to know that things have gone horribly awry here on planet Earth. But, you know, being aware of that kind of stuff. Now, there are astrologers that will say this is a time that you genuinely want to pay attention and be aware of violence. And I don't often go there with the astrology, right? You know, if you've been listening to me, I tend to keep it a little more abstract, a little more philosophical in our interpretations of this stuff. But this is one of the transits where I do kind of agree with a lot of other astrologers in that you need to actually be aware of physical danger. Maybe not a great time to like walk home super late at night through a rough part of town. maybe not a great time to like pick a fight with somebody in traffic who cuts you off. Might be a week where you really need to recognize that you could, help somebody find out after they have fucked around, but maybe taking the high road and keeping peace for yourself is the safer thing to do. I don't want to scare you with anything. Probably won't be anything like that in your personal life. But just be aware. Just be aware. Folks are highly fussy when Mars is conjunct Pluto. And it happens for us basically every other year. It takes Mars about 2.5 years to make its way all the way around the sky one time. And so approximately every 2 to 3 years, we're going to have a Mars conjunct Pluto moment. So, here's the global tantrum. Get your diapers ready, guys. Get the wet wipes out, because here we go. And then as we move into the end of the week, right, and that day is probably going to resonate throughout the lunar week, because it's right smack dab in the middle. But following that up, we have the moon entering Taurus, and then on the 15th, we have Mercury sextile the North Node and Chiron in Aries at 15, 16-ish degrees. And sextiles tend to be a little more subdued than the trines and squares and oppositions and conjunctions. They're a little quieter, but they're extremely helpful. And so, given again that this is a week where we are calling in the information, we're calling in the wisdom, we're calling in the vision of what the future could be for us, these are both really helpful transits for calling in information on how to express our authentic selves, and how our past experiences inform and influence our current trajectory and desires. Remember, the moon at the beginning of the week is trine the South Node, encouraging us to hold on to stuff from the past that's really not serving us, and in fact probably inhibiting us. And so here we have Mercury sextile the North Node. That's like, where are we headed? Let's bring in the new energy. What are we doing next? How are we moving forward? In all of that stuff, the last thing that I'll mention about things happening in the sky are our heliacal risings. So throughout the year, as the sun appears to pass through the constellations, it will come into alignment with fixed stars. And the fixed stars are called fixed stars because the sun and the star meet on the same day every year. And by day, I mean degree in our orbit around the sun, not the arbitrary calendar days that we use. The numbers on the calendar are totally arbitrary. That's whatever. This is about us being in a particular degree of our orbit around the sun, and that makes it look like the sun and that fixed star in alignment, and it happens over and over and over again. And it really it does change, but it changes at such a slow pace, like such a slow pace, that it's an incredible way of marking time through time. And so the fixed stars that we are working with this week, on 2/9, the day of the new moon, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Castra, and Castra is a fortress. So we have fortress imagery here of like, what are we building, right? What is the solid, stable foundation of the vision of the future that we are hoping to maybe lay the first brick of with this new moon in Aquarius? On 2/11, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Nashira. And on 2/12, we have the heliacal risings of the fixed stars Deneb al-Gedi and Sadal Sud. And why I'm kind of listing those all together is because they're very close to each other in the sky. They're kind of thought of as like a 3-pack. Nashira is translated as the lucky one and is the bearer of good news, especially when thought of as kind of being paired with Deneb al-Gedi. And this is certainly a week for some good news, right? Again, we're calling in those visions of the future. Deneb al-Gedi is, in some systems, called the tail of the goat because it's actually found in Capricorn, aka the precession of the equinoxes, aka the zodiacal precession. Go look at the Wikipedia page. We have no time. But we do talk about it in the classes. But when we think of Deneb el-Gedi in conjunction with Nashira, these two are also called the two friends. And I love that, right? Because it's reminding us about partnership and community. Like, I'm not doing this alone. I'm with a collective. And then Sadal Sud is the luckiest of the lucky. And sometimes it's even called the Star of Mighty Destiny. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that these are the fixed stars that we are working with in this week with our Aquarius new moon that is saying, what is the destiny that we are really calling in? What am I afraid to call in? Because it's time for me to be my most authentic self, live my most authentic life, and witness that deep level of freedom and originality and unorthodox altruism, like all of those Aquarian words. It's time for us to witness this in ourselves and witness this in the world around us. So we have so many helpers this week that are really trying to guide us into orientation with these ideas and set us up, right? I'm thinking to that Mercury-Jupiter square that's happening at the beginning of the week, right after the new moon, of what's the information that I need? Where are the flaws in my grand design? What's the work I need to do to orient myself to this work? Show me the hard parts too, right? South Node, trining the moon. Show me the parts where I'm resistant to change. Show me the regressive behaviors I'm holding on to, or the regressive belief systems, or the regressive political systems, the regressive philosophies that I'm holding on to because I'm afraid to change. I'm scared of the work that it's going to call up. Fuck that shit. You're a witch, bitch. Let's go. Get your broom. Let's sweep in the good luck. Let's make this happen. Let's stir the cauldron. Don't be afraid. Or be afraid and do it anyways. Right? Like, what are we doing with our witchcraft? If not gearing ourselves, girding our loins, right? For this future and riding out on the fiery dragon, and going to meet the future on the horizon. Okay. Some tools that can help us with this work this week. From our tarot, we can work with the star card. I have a big piece of writing on my website about Imbolc, and there's a good chunk in there that talks about the star card and working with it. But ultimately, when we are hanging out in the star card, we are leaving behind temporal, short-sighted, constrictive belief systems, practices, philosophies, and we are invoking those most ancient wisdom pillars that have proven themselves to be true throughout time, that are always oriented to self-awareness, deep liberation, authenticity, originality, innovation, the brilliance of the potential of the human species. The star card is very much oriented to all of that kind of work. And it really talks about how it's not an either or. It is about incorporating your lived experience and the things that you subjectively have experienced and come to understand about the world, and bringing that into alignment with that stuff that has proven itself to be true over the millennia about being a member of this species on this planet. Just that. It's no big deal, right? It's just little things. If we're wanting to work with the mineral world, some of the stones that can be super helpful for us at this time period are clear quartz, aquamarine, my personal favorite for working with Aquarius energy, fluorite, and amethyst. And out of all of those, aquamarine sometimes can be expensive because it's a beryl. It's a type of topaz. So if you're looking for fancy aquamarine, you're going to probably pay a little bit for it, but usually you can find pretty cheap chunks of it in crystal shops. Those other stones, clear quartz, fluorite, amethyst, extremely inexpensive. Shouldn't be difficult to find at all. They're very common. And I also, I mean, I love working with all of those with Aquarius, but aquamarine and fluorite, definitely my faves. I tend to kind of veer amethyst a little bit more towards Pisces, but that's just me and my subjective stuff. So listen to your intuition and, you know, go hang out at the crystal shop. And I've given you journaling suggestions at the beginning or when we were talking about our moon stuff and our astrology stuff. Another one that you could focus on here is, in what ways am I drawn to initiating dialogues with ancient and futuristic wisdom sources, focusing on establishing a better world for everyone? That. And last but not least, for our Aquarius lunar body work and plant body work, during the new moon in Aquarius, we are awakening, activating, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action. The legs, especially the knees and ankles, these are the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Aquarius. As I say every episode of this podcast, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of witchery, obviously. So check with your trusted health provider and make sure that that stuff is appropriate for you. And also we can always walk through or work through the metaphor of it. So where are we walking, right? What are we slogging through? What am I taking a knee to, right? Or what do I need to bend down and focus on? You know, all that stuff that we can think about. Again, look at the drawing on a lot of the star cards. That person is literally has both of their knees bent, and one is, you know, pointing out in front of them, and the other one is pointing down to the ground, right? When they often have one knee on the ground, and so it's about that experience of being in the body and still thinking about where we're headed in the future. There's more to that position that we often see the figure in the star card holding. So if that's something that is enticing for you, go and do a little bit of research on that position that the person is kneeling in. And then for our plant body work, first of all, it's a new moon, so if you haven't spun your plants in a while, spin your plants at least a quarter of a turn diasil or sunwise, clockwise. And when we are considering our winter crops, this is a great time for cultivating, for harvesting, for drying and storage. This is a fantastic time for doing a little pest control or disease control, checking on how the plants are doing as we're moving into the next phase of winter, right? That dry, cold winter energy and weather is going to start to fade, and we're going to start moving back into wet winter energy. And yes, we can get fungus, we can get mold, we can get weird bugs. So just give everybody a look-see. We can also do some plowing, aka aeration of the soil. If weeding is appropriate, that's a good time to do it. This is also a great time for grafting and layering and taking cuttings. And if your garden, metaphysically, metaphorically, or physically, or phorically, is ready for it, this is a great time for planting annual crops that bear their fruits or leaves or whatever above ground, especially our leafy crops. This is a great time for planting cereals, planting grains, melons, cucumbers, celery, cabbage, spinach, etc. Obviously, that is definitely not true for some folks around the planet. It's still far too cold. The ground is still far too hard to do that stuff. But you might start your starts around this time. Very, very appropriate symbolism for Imbolc as well. All right, my witches. That is this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if this work is doing something for you, please join my Patreon. You are literally supporting this podcast existing. It makes it possible for me to have time in my life, not doing other things and doing this and doing the research for it every week and setting it up for you. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention before we're out, some plant helpers, and I'm gonna probably start incorporating these as well every week. We talk about stones and tarot and all of that stuff. But other plant helpers that you might work with for the Aquarius new moon are ashwagandha, maidenhair fern, and mullein. If you have any of that stuff that you dried from last year, this is a good time for working with that as well. All right, that's everything. Blessed be community. We got this shit. Let's keep stirring the cauldron. Let's keep riding our brooms. Let's keep sweeping in the good energy and sweeping out the bullshit. And I will most likely see you next week. We are going to come back to doing our weekly podcasts because I, too, am waking up from my winter's nap. Blessed be.